What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Adidas Dame 9. Let's get into them. Now, it has been a while since we've gotten an update to the Dame flagship line of shoes. We've had updates in more of his budget categories and the extended play. I mean, it's been a while since we have gotten, like I said, an update to the flagship. These are definitely different than the Dame 8. And to me, they also remind me of another shoe in Adidas's lineup, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, starting off in the uppers, like I just said, the uppers to me of the Dame 9 remind me a lot of the Harden 8, but just a little bit more, I don't know, compact and economical, I think is the best words to describe it. Now, on the outer surface, you have paneling going across the entire shoe, wrapping around the heel counter, going all the way around the toe cap guard. But what the more interesting thing is what is underneath of that. Now, the Dame 9 has something that is actually really unique in terms of the tongue. This is a quasi slipper tongue or booty liner tongue. Now, what that means is the ankle collar, right? It is attached all the way around the ankle collar until it gets to more of like the mid lace line, and then it opens up, and then it is attached again at the distal lace line. So there actually is a gap between the tongue as well as the uppers of the shoe as it gets more distal, but then it, reattaches. That also means that these outer layers of the uppers can also move independent, but more importantly, lock down independent of the uppers. It's the same thing we see in the more recent Harden shoes, where you're getting all the degrees of freedom and freedom of movement of a more booty liner or slipper tongue type shoe, but you get the lockdown of a traditional three-piece. And I actually think the Dame 9 kind of takes that one step further, because Hardens are pretty bulky shoes, for better or for worse. They kind of rely on a lot of bulk to achieve that containment, whereas in the Dame 9, like I said, it's actually the same concept. And I think it accomplishes that goal pretty much on par with the Hardens, but like I said, a little bit more of an economical package. And so it's really no surprise that the heel slippage on these things is just about none, even right off the jump. Really very, very mild heel slippage. And then, like I said, once you're able to kind of break in that lace line, once you're kind of able to get that bulkier outer layer of the uppers to come over, really, the heel slippage is none, which is nice to see. Now, as you go into the inside of the heel counter, which I thought was interesting, you do get a decently strong heel counter and a lot of padding in the more the superior heel counter and ankle collar. But there is this giant pouch on the bottom with like no padding in it, which I'm wondering if there was supposed to be some padding in there or not, but I thought that was kind of interesting to see. Now, as you move further onto the inside of the shoe, you'll see these 4 stripes here, which is interesting because Adidas is 3 stripes, but you'll see these 4 stripes here, which are extensions of these outrigger lace eyelets. The one thing I don't like about these outrigger lace eyelets is it really looks like the stitching is kind of straining to hold them in as it is. So that would be, to me, like the first thing that would go on these things would be the attachment of these outrigger lace eyelets to kind of their more superior attachments on the shoe. They're still stitched in, below that, so they should be fine, but to me, I could just see these pop in here and there. I'm not sure. We'll see in the months and years to come if that does come to fruition. That's the one weak spot I can see in these uppers. Now, moving further into there, as you can see, the tongue is actually pretty thin, had no lace irritation whatsoever. That's because of the way the laces lay in the shoe. That's the one nice thing about this lace configuration, is they lay a little bit more flat. Now, the tongue is super breathable. There are a ton of pores. Like I said, there is an opening there in that slipper tongue, so it does allow some heat to egress. As you go into the forefoot, though, as you can see, you've just got layer after layer of backing, right? And although that is very strong for containment, if you look at this thing on the breathability test, it did heat up 111.9 degrees, which I actually thought was kind of a miracle with these, with how much material this shoe is encased in. I mean, it is just enveloped in layers on layers of pretty strong material. But if you look at the breathability mapping, I think that tells the bigger tale. As you can see, fog is blown out of the tongue, blown out of both sides of the tongue pretty good, but nothing in the forefoot of the shoe, nothing around the shoe. And I had the heat gun on this when I was doing the breathability test, really in some parts of the outside of the shoe, it wasn't heating up much more than a few degrees versus my pre-temperature. So I mean, this shoe is going to hold on to a lot of heat and moisture in certain areas. Yeah, the tongue is going to breathe really well, and with where the heat gun goes, right, it's right in here. There might have been some home cooking because the tongue is so thin, but I would say if you're playing with these in very hot, humid conditions, look for these to hold on to some heat and moisture. And speaking of that really rugged upper, if you look at the upper durability test, 10-second Highest Grit sandpaper, interestingly enough, the burr does start to work through that very outer coating. It obviously does not get through the uppers of these. They're so thick, there's just so much protection. And you do get exposed foam. However, that exposed foam is overlapping all of this material. So yeah, the uppers might look pretty weird to dragging or sliding on pretty gritty outdoor courts, but there's still, a decent amount of protection between your foot and the ground. But getting into the midsole teardown, this is an entire bed of Light Strike foam. Like I said, Adidas has been doing some different things with their Light Strike. In these ones, it is just so soft and pillowy. I mean, one of the more comfortable feeling midsole foams I've had on recently. And, you know, to me, some Light Strike products I have not liked at all. I felt that they're bottom light, but they're also a little bit stiff at times, or they don't have a lot of pop, and they're not very plush either. Like, I wasn't really sure where they were going with it. This formulation of Light Strike that is in the Dame 9s, this is just absolutely fantastic. It is very, very comfortable, but also does feel like it has some spring underneath of it. It does have a bottom-loaded shank, which does send 2 little leaflets into the forefoot, right? You can actually see them on the teardown. They're small, but they are there, and so with this shank, it was actually pretty easy to get through with my knife, but because it is so long and bottom loaded, like I said, it's more helping with stability of the shoe. And because, like I said, it has such a large surface area, that's what's really giving it all of its stability, not necessarily the stiffness of the shank itself. Look at these things on the bounce height test. Got 34 centimeters in the rear foot, 32.5 in the forefoot. That's kind of on the upper level of what we've seen Light Strike do recently. Like I said, when you have it in hand, and on foot, I should say, like I said, it does feel pretty bouncy and springy. So to me, you're getting the best parts of, number one, pretty darn long shank, because it is bottom loaded. You are feeling all of that nice, you know, really forgiving foam. But the foam feels buttery enough, and that shank, like I said, although very long, a little bit more flexible, allows this shoe to feel extremely nimble while also giving a little bit of pop. But getting into what's undoubtedly my least favorite part of the Dame 9 is the outsole tread. Now, I do like that it is a full-length tread pattern. That is fantastic. You do get a break point in the metatarsal heads. That's nice as well. The pattern itself is just a really gentle kind of lightning bolt pattern, more of like a geometric lightning bolt pattern, if that even makes sense. But it is just a very, very like gentle arc going all the way throughout the shoe. Now, on the grip test ramp, it does slip at 38 degrees, which isn't bad, but it's also not super elite. And then if you look at it on the viewing box, I thought that was a little bit more of the interesting tale. Not a ton of rubber movement, not a ton of interaction. Usually when we see tread that's this thin, this narrow, and it has all these gaps in it, usually you're seeing a little bit more movement in there. I did notice with me on court, number one, it picked up a ton of dust. It did need constant wiping. Number two, it screeches like crazy. I mean, it makes noise like you wouldn't believe. But that noise does not translate whatsoever into grip. Like I said, if you were wiping them down, you were keeping on top of them, the grip was really, it was actually very nimble, right? Very easy grip, kind of going along with the theme of the shoe. And we'll talk about this in the fit section too, why these shoes are just so nimble. But you did have to keep wiping them down. If you keep them in ideal conditions, the grip is good. It's not super elite, but it's confident, like I said, as long as you keep them clean. And looking at the speed ratio of these things, they come in at a 2.07, shank score of 0.2, brings it up to a 2.27. I kind of think that's where they belong. They are, you know, a little bit heavier shoes, right? And, you know, that shank, like I said, it is a little bit more flexible, and yeah, it feels very buttery and everything, but it also feels pretty buttery. It doesn't feel like a diving board. There's really not a lot of launch effect on these. So I will say, like I said, they're very quick, nimble shoes. I know I've said that a million times. I'm well aware. I'm looking at myself in the camera saying it. But like I said, they are very quick, speedy, little nimble shoes. But in terms of like getting from coast to coast, they're not the rocket ships that some other shoes are. And once again, just looking at the makeup of that outsole tread, if you look at it on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. I mean, yeah, about 1 millimeter of damage on these things. And like I said, because they are so thin and narrow, you take these on an outdoor court, there is nothing to protect these. The durometer on these is only 14 and some change. So I think if you keep these on indoor courts, I think you're just fine. But like I said, on an outdoor court, they are going to get torn up in the outsole pretty quick. But getting into the fit of the Dame 9, I think the geometry of these pretty much tells the tale of the shoe, both in fit as well as performance. Now, I think the biggest thing about these is they come in at an 11-degree inflare, but where the shoe actually begins to inflare, I think, is the most influential part of this shoe. That inflare does not start until very, very distal in the shoe, basically the break point here in the metatarsal heads. And because of that, the shoe stays incredibly stable in the mid and the rear foot because it's pretty straight lasted. And in the forefoot, that's where you get that inflare. So like I said, the shoe stays very stable in the rear foot, but then also has that really nimble feeling in the forefoot, right? That step to step, those bouncing steps, right? Dancing up on your toes, feels super easy to transition step. that is honestly, and like I said, the inflare isn't all that much. It really does, you can really feel it on court, like I said, it's just all, where the inflare starts on the shoe. Now they do come in just a hair long at 29 degrees. The metatarsal width is 9.6 centimeters, toe box width at 10.6 centimeters, and then a 29-degree toe box inflare. So I'd say a narrow and medium foot, you can go true to size. A narrow foot, if you're not long-toed, I think you probably go down a half size and these get a little more weight reduction, which I think really helps these out for sure. A medium and a 2E, I think you just go true to size. A 4E, I would be going up a half size on these things. And if you're somebody with a pretty big tailor's bunion, you might want to go up one size, or a bunion one size, just because, like I said, that flare on the shoes, that inflare is right there. And then where the flange on these things sits, there's a lot of material around that tailor's bunion. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, I think they're good for most things, right? It's kind of dealer's choice on these because, like I said, the light strike in this is like I said, it's very forgiving, but it also has some structure to it. They do not want to buckle under themselves. They like to bend really at the right areas. And to me, you can fit an orthotic in them too, which is great. So, I mean, like I said, to me, these are dealer's choice. In terms of an ankle sprainer, the flange on these things is pretty wide and is built up pretty well. Even though these are a slipper tongue shoe, I'd say, hybrid slipper tongue shoe, I still think they're okay for an ankle sprainer. One thing I will say is with light strike, like I said, that foam does start to break down over time. Now, like I said, this does feel pretty substantial underfoot, this light strike, but until proven otherwise, I would just say if you want to make light strike last longer, put an orthotic over top of it, and that's really where, to me, that foam kind of comes alive. I do think with this formulation of it, though, I think it will last. I do think the Dame 9s will last longer than something, let's say, like the Ubersonic 4s or something like that. So keep that in mind. But once again, very forgiving shoes. No, it's not Bounce Pro, which I think is really one of the more elite foams for the snake bitten foot in terms of both giving you pop and shock absorption and kind of insulation, but it still does feel pretty darn good. And with that being said, getting into the performance of these, I know I've said it throughout the entire video, but they are just very nimble shoes. They're very buttery feeling shoes. To me, they don't have the snap of the Dame 8s, right? And their containment to weight ratio, and if that's a thing, isn't as high as the Dame 8s. To me, like I said, they feel just a little bit heavier on foot. I said they feel heavier on foot. There's just more shoe. They do allow a lot more freedom than the Dame 8 did while maintaining containment though. So there's some pluses and minuses there, right, from the 8s to the 9s. I do think that Adidas threaded the needle perfectly when it came to super buttery feel, degrees of freedom, and just freedom of motion, right? Especially in the rear foot, but also keeping it super containing without making the shoe, too bulky. I would just say on my floor in here, I noticed their quality is a lot better than when I was at, more of the full length floor of the community center gym. Because here, I have obstacles, right? If I run long or if I fall over, right, or I trip, I'm tripping into the hoop, I'm tripping into the tennis wall, the wall of shoes, whatever. I'm knocking paintings off the wall. So to me, in a confined space, I think these things really did their best work. Getting up and down the court, and like I said, they felt fine, going the whole arc of the three-point line, they felt fine, and getting up for quick jump shots, things like that, they feel great. Like I said, to me, these shoes really come alive when you are backed into a corner, or like you're crab dribbling through a crowd or things like that, trying to create that little bit of separation, right, when there's maybe a couple people blitzing you or things like that. And so while these things are decent enough in wide open spaces, if you want to see the real tools of this shoe, put these in a situation where you basically need to use your most interesting footwork to get out of a jam. And like I said, that's where the nimbleness of this shoe and the stability of the shoe, like I said, really comes to life. So let me hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially since it's been so long since the Dame 8, so people are just, so loyal to the Dame 8. I'd love to know if you are going with the Dame 9 or going to look for discounted models of the 8s. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see what's inside another one of Adidas's more recent signature shoes to drop, the Adidas AE1 Low, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.